So, Cabinet is expected to meet today to discuss the 2025 budget. The Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's budget speech was controversially postponed last week after disagreements in the main over a VAT hike. Joining us now is the tax and budget policy researcher for the Institute for Economic Justice, Zimbali Mncube. Zimbali, good morning. Thank you very much for your time. So you said that it was important in your release and in some of the work that you've done in proposing an alternative to this now scrapped budget to go beyond the rejected VAT increase and unpack how the Treasury and the Finance Ministry understands the economic context of South Africa. What you also write is that the fiscal strategy is a worst of both worlds middle ground compromise that fails to chart a viable course. Now, I know you've laid out a number of factors to support what you've stated there. Maybe just share one or two with our viewers.
Thanks, Iman, and good morning to your viewers. I think what we are raising is that up to so far, the fiscal strategy has only focused on debt stabilization, and that has been primarily through budget cuts, right? Budget cuts to essential services such as public healthcare and education. And although we're seeing that in this now scrapped budget, that has slightly reversed with the provisioning of services and the allocation increasing in line with inflation. That is enabled or was enabled by this VAT increase, right? And what we are calling for is for the Cabinet and ultimately the National Treasury to see the budget as a tool that can help us transform our society. And we can do that by confronting the realities that South Africa faces, which is unemployment, poverty, and inequality. And that is not what we are seeing in this budget. There is an underinvestment in the allocations to public employment programs. We see a slight increase in social grants. However, the lifeline of those who are unemployed, which is the social relief of distress grant, is still unfunded or does not receive an increase that enables it to expand to cover more beneficiaries or even the value of the grant, right? And so these are the factors that we looked at when we're saying that the fiscal strategy and ultimately the investments in these budgets are a middle ground, but no bold action is taken to ensure that we get out of the challenges we're facing.
So, Zimbali, just a quick note on this before we move on to the next question. What you've heard from some economists saying that what was provided in the budget in terms of that social cushion, mitigating effects, effectively are not that.
No, that's true, because first and foremost, with the VAT increase from the last increase in 2018, we saw that even despite the extension of the zero rating of goods, it didn't actually cushion the impact on poor households and low-income households to actually be shielded from the increase. And so it's an ineffective strategy to help shield the poor, right? On top of that, I'll make an example with the child social grants, which saw an increase of 50 rands. Given that those who receive the grants, the caregivers, and the goods that they would have purchased would have seen an increase of 44 rands, it means that this grant or this increase would have just amounted to 6 rands. So in the context of the VAT increase, really, it amounted to giving the poor on the one hand and then taking on the other. So it's not a real transformational strategy.
I'm really keen to get to some of your alternatives, because as you read through that paper, it does seem as if you pose things that are sustainable potentially in the long run. There is some convergence between the position that you take, and we saw the SARS Commissioner Edward Kieswetter take on empowering SARS to be a little more robust and more effective in collecting taxes that are already in the system. So I'll come back to that in just a moment. I also like the idea of increased VAT on luxury items, for example, and then leaving the items that would normally be in the food basket of those who aren't, as economically independent to be able to still manage their lives. But in the part where you talk about opportunities and dangers, it was interesting that you said that the 2% point VAT increase is not the only misguided decision. So too is the continued path of underinvestment, and you lay that out quite nicely in your paper as well. But you say it's also equally problematic, the DA's extremist position of no tax increases. So let's just go to that one, because we talk about how the GNU's, coalescing or not, divided through this issue. Talk to us about the DA's position, and then we'll go into some of your alternatives.
Yeah, I think what we are concerned about is that this support of no VAT increase will likely be conflated with no tax increase altogether, right? And our view is that there is scope to increase taxes, particularly on the wealthy, in a manner that does not harm the most marginalized in our society. And that is a position that we've seen the DA hold in the past, right? And so we are calling for the recognition that taxes can play in helping us support some of these challenges we are facing. And over and above that, I think what we're also concerned about is that the gap that we are in now may be an opportunity to possibly catalyze the implementation of a fiscal anchor, which is a extreme fiscal rule that limits government spending and borrowing. And this is something that the DA has supported in Parliament before, even putting forward its own proposal that was not considered by Parliament. And so we see that the National Treasury has put that on the agenda again. One of the documents that was published with the budget that was withdrawn was a fiscal anchor discussion paper, which we are still engaging. And so those are our two concerns, that these, in search of alternatives, these would be the easy and low-hanging fruits to go to, as opposed to ramping up investment and taxing the wealthy.
All right, so let's then go to the biggest talking point, right, which is around the proposals around a VAT increase. There is a permutation that you are suggesting. Share that with our viewers, and how much money it could raise.
No, there are different proposals that we put forward. First and foremost, like you said, we agree with the Commissioner. The SARS should be capacitated to deal and collect revenue. And SARS currently has an underfunding of about 20 billion that should be addressed, right? And then we divide our proposals into three. There are firstly tax breaks that are currently being given to high-income earners and the wealthy. And those include medical tax credits, which we see currently we're losing about 39 billion due to that. There's also tax credit links to our pension funds. We see that as a result of that, there's about 82 billion that the government loses. And then there's also the issue of the employment tax incentive, which we haven't seen any evidence that has been put forward as to what sort of employment opportunities or how has it mitigated unemployment, especially for young people, right? And so we are losing about 5 billion due to this ETI. And those are some of the tax breaks that we think should be considered as like things that can be immediately implemented. We also have targeted new taxes on high-income earners. One of them you've already mentioned, which is the luxury VAT. And this is a VAT that would be levied at about 25%. That is specifically targeted at luxury goods and luxury items. And this would help us generate about 9 billion annually, right? And then with the improvement of the targeting and the mechanisms, the revenue might increase over the long run. And then we also have the proposal to restore the corporate income tax back to 28%. You remember, Iman, that it was decreased. And I think, like I said, with the ETI, we haven't seen the evidence that this corporate decrease has actually brought about investment like the budget said it would. And so we worry that these tax breaks end up just being incentives to operate at the rich.
Yeah. And again, then you've already answered what I would have asked you next, which would have been the limit. In other words, the upper threshold, which is why Treasury and the Ministry wasn't going after, this particular cohort around corporations and high income earners, or corporations, particularly around the 28, 27%, that they'd reach the upper limits. And you're arguing, and you've answered that already, but it also connects to two important things: that it hasn't had the desired effect that it was projected and promised to have. And that's a similar argument that the commissioners also raised, that we haven't seen the revenue generation that was anticipated in 2018 when we raised VAT from 14 to 15%. So I'm going to put that aside for a moment and really encourage our viewers to go and have a look at this report that you've put out, which has now laid out all the numbers. When you add all of these amounts up that you're sharing with us around other places that government could go to find the money that we need to pay for our budget and pay for our expenses, service our debt, how much did you come up with? What's the final calculation here in your alternative?
I think we are looking at about up to 250 billion. But I think, obviously, as I've raised before, it depends on the levels at which, for instance, you target the rates and which income groups are you targeting, right? Because there's thresholds in which you can begin. For instance, when we speak about the pension fund credits, we're saying that it should target high income earners, those who earn above 750,000 rand per annum, right? But even when you start with those who earn above 1 million, right, you can still generate significant revenue. So it depends on which level do we actually begin. And also there are much more sort of medium-term measures that may not necessarily be something that can help us in the next 2 weeks as the cabinet looks for solutions. And these include things like implementing a wealth tax, which on its own, on just the 1% of the population, can help us generate between 70 to 160 billion, right? And then there's a resource rent tax, which focuses on extractive industries, which can also help us raise about 38 billion, right? And so you can see that there are the different measures available, but also they are in the manner that SARS can take them up. They are different.
Yeah.
There are those that are much more immediate. There are those that are much more, they need a discussion within cabinet and with broader civil society and citizens to have a dialogue that will shape how they emerge.
All right. So you said the potential here is 250 billion. Obviously, it's not all of it's in the immediate term, but it's something that can happen over time. The number I believe we're chasing is 195 billion. Am I right?
I think for this budget, the government has an immediate sort of obligation to sort of look elsewhere for the 58 billion that it proposed in this budget, right?
Okay.
And so that is the number that we're looking for as it stands. But obviously, we do have pressing priorities over and above this. And so I think revenue generation is something that we need to look at in the long term, not just for what we need to address at the moment.
Yeah. I got to leave it there, but I want to squeeze in something really quickly. Are you going to talk to them? Are they going to talk to you? What happens? Is this just something you throw out into the ether as a, intellectual exercise?
No, I think we endeavor to engage with government through various ways. We have partnerships with some of the departments where we share our resources and present. And so we'll continue doing that and reaching out in different ways, especially given that there is a cabinet meeting ongoing. And hopefully our proposal can help shape the discussions there.
Zimbali, Mncube, thank you very much from the IEJ. They're just talking about their alternative budget. Appreciate your time this morning.